My 29F husband, 32 meters, is overly obsessed with our daughter. Throwaway because my husband knows my username. I have hesitated to bring this up because on paper it sounds really stupid. Before she was born, people had told me stories of men getting jealous of their wives giving so much attention to the baby. I never thought it would be the other way around. Our daughter is 1.5 years old, our only child so far, and both my husband and I love her to pieces. However, since being born, she has become my husband's entire identity. In a way it's really sweet, but it's gotten to the point where all he ever thinks or talks about. In the year and a half since she's been born, we have not left the house together, just he and I. Not once. Whenever I have suggested that we go anywhere without her and leave her with her grandparents for a little bit, he looks at me like I'm insane, and will usually say something like, "Why would you want to go anywhere without her? I would just be missing her the entire time, wishing she was there." I mean, I love her too, but I also miss spending time with my husband. I don't think that feeling is reciprocated. Even when we are hanging out and having a conversation after she's gone to bed, he will almost always steer the conversation back to our daughter and wonder if she's too hot, too cold, talk about everything she did that day. He will scroll through her photos and videos until it's time for us to go to sleep, and will constantly say things like she's my everything or she's the only thing that matters to me. Normally the sentiment would seem cute at face value, but this actually seems to be literal with him. It's almost like if I dare to want to have a conversation or to do something that doesn't revolve around her, he thinks I'm being selfish. I don't think he really sees me as anything more than our daughter's mom anymore. I feel like I'm losing my partner and best friend. He's become a judgmental helicopter dad. I have even noticed that when he talks to his friends, she is all he talks about. At this point I'm sure they're tired of it too. One thing to know is that during my pregnancy, he developed an alcohol addiction because he was so stressed out about becoming a father. Lots of childhood stuff to unpack there. It all culminated into him having to go seek help and not being there for the first 3 weeks of my daughter's life. He's been sober ever since, but this affected him very deeply, in that he's had to deal with immense shame and guilt for missing those first few weeks. Because of that I kind of understood his zealousness at first, because I knew he was trying to make up for lost time and to prove his devotion. But it's been 18 months since, and he's still as over the top as ever. How do I get him to take a step back? I don't know how to tell him I'm feeling a bit neglected because of your obsession with our daughter without sounding insane or like I'm being immature and jealous of a baby. Too long didn't read. Husband has made his entire identity about being a father at the expense of our relationship. He does not see the value in spending time with me apart from our daughter. At first I thought he was making up for missing the first 3 weeks of her life, but his zealousness has not let up at all in the 18 months since she's been born. I don't know how to make it stop. He replaced one addiction with another. He needs therapy, individual therapy for him to manage his anxiety, group therapy with other alcoholics, and couples therapy with you, in which you sit down with him and share this post with him in front of a counselor. 100% dry drunk behavior. Definitely do not use the word obsessed when speaking to him about this. That will most definitely put him in defense mode immediately. I know it would for me. I would also include how he is a very loving and devoted father and that you are so thankful for everything he does for your daughter. No, add a little sugar and reassurance to set the mood first. You can simply say, I'm feeling neglected and I miss spending quality alone time with my husband. You don't have to say because you're obsessed with our daughter, which is guaranteed to put him on the defensive. If he balks or tries to blow you off or does anything besides listen attentively and talk with you about how to fix this, follow up with, I want us to have a relationship with each other outside of our roles as parents. If you don't agree, we need to bring this to a marriage counselor, because I am not willing to spend years waiting for my husband to notice me again. I'll let you know when I've found someone. Do you have a time of day you'd prefer to meet? It must feel like getting a wish from a super literal genie. Like yes, you just wanted him to be a sober and doting dad, but you meant just as in, as opposed to wishing for $1 billion, not just as in, he has no other personality aspects. Wish you the best with this. I can't really share wisdom or advice, but I hope acknowledging that this is a valid thing helps some. You seem to have a grasp on the gratitude appropriate for the situation, so you aren't simply being selfish. This sounds almost like religiosity, where an addict replaces their addiction with religion, to the point of obsession where that is the only thing keeping them afloat. What your husband is doing with your daughter sounds very similar. Does he go to any kind of support group for addicts? It sounds like he really needs therapy to deal with his underlying issues. Getting sober is great, but it doesn't solve the problems that led to addiction. I would definitely tell him you want to see a therapist together. If you need a reason why, tell him you've been having trouble communicating since your daughter has been born and you want to work it out with him as a team. I wouldn't start with telling him you feel neglected or he is obsessed with your child. My 30M adult sister, 25F, is seriously becoming a burden. This is long. Sorry, I figured it was best to put in everything, in case the context mattered to the solution, especially since I played a part in why things are getting worse, so me just talking to her might not work so well. I've sectioned it so it's easy to skip past details that might be irrelevant. For some background, before we get into the current problem, feel free to skip this, it's just speculation. Ever since we were very young, my sister has been my bully. Not only is it incredibly embarrassing to be bullied by your younger sister, but the adults in your life tend not to believe you could be bullied by a cute little girl a whole head shorter than you. As a result, when we were kids, she would start fights because she wanted something. For example, we might be sharing some candy, so she would scream that I punched her, and I would be sent to my room. More candy for her, or she might randomly hit me and then bawl when I pushed her away, making sure everyone saw that I pushed her. She'd always gotten away with this and she pushed it further and further, escalating to threatening me with knives as a teenager, and once even kicking the shit out of me. She's a large lady, so even though she has always been shorter than me, she throws that weight around a lot, and I refuse to hit back. Can say without a doubt, she was the favorite child. The end result of all this, she grew up completely spoiled. My mother, 52F, is disabled and spends a lot of time in bed due to chronic pain. Growing up, I looked after her a lot, cooking / cleaning / etc. But she didn't have much company, and I think my sister became that company. To the point where she didn't even need to go to school if she didn't want to, she'd just stay home with mum and be that company. Even after my mum married again, my sister was still being spoiled because he wasn't home much due to work. My sister has never been made to do something she didn't want to in her entire life. I strongly suspect this is why she's acting this way. Fast forward to today. I've been living out of the house since I was 19, but she's still there. She's nothing but a burden on my mother. She doesn't cook, she doesn't clean, she doesn't pay rent or bills, and she barely works. She has a job, but she calls in sick and schedules days off near constantly, and basically ends up working about 1 day a week. She has a boyfriend, 25M, who is the exact same, right down to skipping work, and his mother doesn't like my sister, so he's practically living there, and they're both constantly leeching off my mother, who is only on a disability pension and can barely afford to provide for herself, let alone for them. She called me in tears yesterday because there was no food in the house, and she only had $10 in her purse, and my sister had taken it to buy dinner from McDonald's for herself and her boyfriend. My mum will be hobbling around cleaning their mess around them while they just sit there watching her. My mum likes a clean house, but with my sister and her boyfriend there, it always looks as though a bomb has hit it. If mum even tries to ask either of them to clean, my sister carries on and throws a tantrum about how she had to do everything as a child and had no childhood thanks to your disability, which is entirely untrue and incredibly hurtful to mum. My sister never did anything to help as a kid. My elderly grandfather, 82M, comes around to help my mother because I live 3 hours away, and my sister, though living there, does absolutely nothing to help. He tried asking her one day to help him move some furniture so he could vacuum, his back is really bad, and she just scowled and silently went to her room. She resents me. I'm currently retraining to be a nurse and I'm holding down a decent accountancy job. Once I heard her screaming, not yelling/arguing, actually screaming, at my mum because you're spending a lot of time with him lately. I visited for a week and I'd treated mum to lunch that day. Any attempts to get her to look for a better job or try higher education is met with, "Oh, I bet you wish I was perfect like me. He was always the favorite." Or, "You don't care about my mental health." The boyfriend is a frustration too, and at the center of the latest drama that my sister is generating, because I stupidly asked that he didn't come to the family Christmas. The Christmas/Boxing Day drama, it'd been causing multiple public blow-ups because he'd cheated on her, and they always devolved into embarrassing screaming matches. I didn't want that to happen in front of our elderly grandparents on a day that's traditionally supposed to be a quiet lunch to relax after the stress of Christmas. That was probably a bad guy move on my part, but we always hold 2 Christmases, the first everyone can come Christmas where we do a big lunch, and all the extended family and boyfriends and girlfriends are there, and a second on the day after Christmas, where it's traditionally always been myself, my sister, my mum, and my grandparents only. We don't dress up, we don't put up decorations, we just relax. He was absolutely invited to the first Christmas, but I'd asked that we keep this family Christmas as a family Christmas. I was the one paying for all the food and organizing it, and I didn't want drama, nor did I want to shell out money to feed a layabout who has been such a burden on my mother. If I'd been able to ask my sister not to come, believe me, I would have. My sister agreed, and said, "I know. It's a family thing. It's always just us," in a tone that implied I was stupid for even thinking he'd come in the first place. But then come Christmas evening, the boyfriend came over and then wasn't leaving. At around 1 a.m., I asked her when he was going home and she replied, "He's not. He's coming tomorrow." To which I replied, "No, he's not. He already agreed to this." I didn't make enough food for an extra person. Cue screaming, slamming doors, "I'm leaving. You all hate me. I hate all of you." Driving off, coming back when they realized they didn't have anywhere else to go. You know, the usual type of thing you'd expect from a 15-year-old throwing a tantrum, except coming out of a woman old enough to have a career. Her childlike boyfriend was sitting playing his Switch with the sound on loud the whole time, completely unbothered. She didn't come to the family Christmas. It was just my grandparents, my mother, and me. It was the first time I'd seen Mum smile in a long time. Mum and my sister live in a small town, and in the next few days, my sister proceeded to spread lies about me, my grandparents, and my mother to anyone who would listen. She works in a supermarket and she was gossiping over the counter to old ladies that play lawn bowls with my gran. She even brought our stepdad, who passed away a few years ago, into it, saying he probably cheated on Mum and she still stayed with him, so she's being a hypocrite about me and my boyfriend. This, by the way, is entirely untrue and not something he would ever do. She told people my mother was kicking her out. She told people we said we hated them, the people she was telling. She told people my grandfather spat at her boyfriend. Literally none of it was true, and it's damaged my grandparents' and mother's social lives. Now she screams in my mother's face every other day, and I'm honestly worried about my mum's safety. The current situation. Mum says she doesn't know when a day is going to be fine or not, because sometimes my sister will pretend everything is normal and sometimes she'll just snap at everything. She is even worse about making mess, and if anyone says anything, she just starts going on and on about Christmas and how she knows we all hate her. She leaves makeup all over the counter. She flooded the bathroom and left the towels to sop up the water on the floor for days where my mum could trip on it. She leaves grease all over the stove when she does cook, rare, and leaves McDonald's wrappers all around the house when she doesn't, extremely common. I'm at the end of my tether. I've been having groceries sent to my mum's house because they're draining her of money, but I know if I give my mum money, they'll get their hands on it, so I pay to have milk and vegetables and stuff like that delivered to the house. I'm not particularly wealthy, but I don't want to see my mum starve, and I feel responsible for this latest blow up because of what happened to Christmas. I just want her gone, but mum is reticent to kick her out because she thinks she'll feel like a bad mother. I think I might be able to convince her to kick them out though. She keeps talking about how lovely it will be when she has the house to herself, then immediately feels bad about thinking that way. How do you even deal with a loud, trashy, violent adult who has a major case of failure to launch? Does anyone have any ideas for how we can safely get her out of the house, or even just convince her to clean up after herself? Anything at all that could alleviate the situation? She's a monster. I'll seriously try anything. Has anyone else had any luck getting through to someone like this? We just need relief. My mum doesn't feel comfortable in her own home and I'm stressing because I live so far away that I can't help my mum out. I would travel down to fix this though. I have a few days in my PTO. We live in Australia, so if there's any legal aid we can access to safely remove her from the house, or some kind of program we could refer her to that anyone knows about, I'd appreciate that. Or if we could talk to her. Does anyone know any ways to start a conversation with someone like this in a way that keeps it constructive? Too long didn't read. My 30M sister, 25F, is leeching off my disabled mum, 52F. My sister has a history of being violent, though only with me. She and her boyfriend, 25M, have been trashing mum's house and spending all her money. She's also been screaming at my mother and ignoring anyone who asks her to help in any way. How do I get her to shape up or ship out? Is there any way to kick her out cleanly, or does anyone know how to get through to someone like this in a way that changes their behavior for the better? I feel awful but I'm just not really attracted to my boyfriend. I, 19F, just don't find my 22M boyfriend of 3 months attractive. When I first met my boyfriend I didn't think anything of his appearance. He wasn't super or ugly or anything, but I just wasn't attracted to him. But getting to know him was like finding a long lost best friend, and he asked me to be his girlfriend and I agreed because we had so much in common and I have never felt so close to a boy before. However, I just was never that attracted to him from the start, much less than previous boyfriends. Lately, I find myself seeing other people's boyfriends on TikTok or other social media and wishing my boyfriend was as cute as them. I feel extremely shallow and terrible about this. As someone with OCD I tend to obsess over things, and this situation has become very anxiety producing for me. I've even sometimes imagined previous boyfriends during sex. I'm so ashamed of myself and don't know what to do. I don't want to break off a relationship with someone I connect with so much, but I sometimes feel like I miss that intense physical attraction to someone. I'm really conflicted. I've never felt like this before, so I'm just really sad and mad at myself. Should I break up with him or try to get past this? Any advice or experience on this would be appreciated. Smile. Too long didn't read. I 19F am not attracted to my 22 meters BF, but I love the rest of our relationship. Should I stay?